Deep Geek Live. This is the start of a new series of live streams where I'm going to be going through the biggest, the most interesting, the most relevant houses in the whole of the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, and just trying to unpick not just what's going to be happening with them in the future, but a little bit about the background, the history, the lore, and so on. And where else can we start than with House Stark? So that's what we're going to do. As always, I'm going to be framing this around questions that I've got from my patrons. But I will pick up on as many questions as I possibly can from the chat as we're going through as well. Just for those who like a little bit of a news update on the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, we did have one very brief bit of news coming through this week, which is House of the Dragon, the prequel spin-off to Game of Thrones, has started their casting call, and they've specifically been talking about two main characters, Rhaenyra and Alicent, which is good because this shows that they have clearly understood the kind of real nature of how the Dance of the Dragons worked, and that this was these two queens at loggerheads one with another. So there's not much more to go on than that, other than the sort of the reiteration that they are looking to be filming next year. They still haven't formally announced a home base or wherever it's going to be filmed or anything like that, but this is progress. The entirety of season 1 has been greenlit already, so it's good news. Hopefully that it won't have been impacted too much by coronavirus, because the writing process obviously doesn't require people to be together as much as the filming process. So hopefully they managed to carry on without too much of an interruption. Rick von Himmlich Spunler, thank you very much. A great name. Thank you for the super chat saying, I love the In Deep Geek. Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. Let's start off with House Stark then. And I've got a question just to sort of kick us off from Maester Mansa over on Patreon, saying, Bran the Builder baffles me. He seems more god than man. Founding House Stark and at least beginning to construct Winterfell makes sense to me. Someone had to do it. Building the wall seems like an enormous task, but if he had assistance from giants and the children, then maybe. But then he supposedly also had a hand in building Storm's End and the High Tower, which are obviously right at the other end of the continent and nothing to do with House Stark. So what's going on there? Well, this is a great way to start, because Bran the Builder is the start of House Stark. So he was Bran Stark, and everything flows down from him. Now, this is one of those characters, and the stories surrounding Bran the Builder are one of the sets of stories that George R.R. Martin is very, very keen for us to understand are legends. They should not be viewed as history any more than we should view King Arthur or Robin Hood as history. Yes, there's something that happened around there. Some of the stories may be true or have elements of the truth, but we shouldn't take them as literal history. So that's the feel that we have to have when we come to Bran the Builder. Clearly, there was somebody who was the start of House Stark. Why not call him Bran? The idea that the person who started House Stark also started the work on Winterfell makes sense. As you say, also the wall. Now, the other things that he's supposed to have had a hand in building, the High Tower, Storm's End, are they possibly him? Well, maybe. If he was some hugely magical person, it's entirely possible. But at the same time, I don't think that they necessarily have to be built by him. You can have something that is sort of built in the style of Bran the Builder, or something along those lines. At the same time as that, we shouldn't necessarily take it as the literal truth that he was the person who oversaw the construction of those other things as well. I think we can say that yes, he was involved in the projects up in the north, in the Winterfell crypts, and in the wall. The wall, I have to stress it every time, when it was first built, it wasn't this massive 700-foot high thing that we now know. It was a normal height wall, maybe a slightly high wall, but it got added to generation after generation. The Night's Watch just added more ice on the top, built it up, built it up, built it up until it's the height that it is at the moment. So it didn't start out being that massive thing. But still, it's a huge undertaking. And it's the kind of thing that actually, it's not the physical structure that is the important thing. It's the fact that there does seem to be some sort of magical barrier going on. Now, so yes, I think that it makes sense that that is connected to Winterfell in some way. They both seem part of the same protective structures that were set up at around that time with the start of House Stark. So that's my take on it. We shouldn't take it as literal truth. We should just take it as George R. R. Martin tells us we must take it, which is as legend. Kyle99 says, "Hi Robert, do you think Brandon Snow's plan to kill the 3 dragons with weirwood arrows for his half-brother Torrhen Stark had any chance of success? Is it possible weirwood arrows are a viable anti-dragon weapon?" So this, for those who don't know this story, this is kind of the background. When Aegon the Conqueror came over, he conquered Westeros. He and his 2 sisters conquered Westeros with their dragons. They didn't actually fight every single part of the 7 kingdoms. They didn't have to fight every part of the 7 kingdoms. They took on Harren the Black at Harrenhal. They showed what could happen there. They helped out with the attack on Storm's End. Obviously, they were attacking Dawn, but when it came to the north pulled together an army and started marching down to defend themselves against this new threat before Torrhen Stark, who became known as the King Who Kneeled, he suddenly realized, you know what, we're not going to be able to stop 3 dragons. I've seen what they've done to Harrenhal. This isn't going to work. And he accepted the rule of the Targaryens. But as the story here is that we get Brandon Snow, this the half brother there, was and we see this through the visions that Bran gets. He tries to make arrows, weirwood arrows. Now, why? Did he have some idea that weirwood would somehow kill dragons? We don't know. That we could pretend, but we simply do not know. What we do know is that the North was its own kingdom. It was very cut off from the rest of the continent. It had its own beliefs, and their beliefs were focused around the magic of the old gods, the weirwood trees. So if they're thinking, how on earth can we destroy these dragons? Obviously, the first thought for some devout northerners would be, well, it's the magic of the old gods is the thing which will destroy them, obviously. And so that is the train of logic that leads you to making arrows from weirwood. Definitely, it's an understandable one. What we do not know is whether or not this was based upon some kind of knowledge. Clearly, dragons have been heard of in the North before that. The dragons have been on Dragonstone. It's not as if it's unknown what these dragons are. So perhaps they've thought about this in the past, but it struck me as more as a defiant act by one person rather than something that House Stark had been considering for a long time. How on earth do we kill dragons? So that's my gut instinct, is it's just a person thinking, how do I do this? I know what. I will use the magic that I know and am aware of. So that's the sort of the overall take I got there. I don't think it's based on any specific bits of knowledge. but we simply do not know. Stephen Dillon says, do you think Lyanna Stark was a warg? We know the warging comes from the Stark line, and all her nieces and nephews are wargs, along with her son. The way her horsemanship is described sounds like more than just skill, half a centaur. I know we'll never know, but I just wanted to see your opinion. It would help explain how she was able to take down 3 grown knights without any experience as the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Okay, so this I like this idea. It's one that, again, we don't have a definitive answer on it, but the things we're told about Lyanna Stark is that she had this incredible bond with horses. That she was half horse. That one is what they'd say, and even House Ricewell, Barbary Dustin, who was Barbary Ricewell, and they loved their horses up there. So they could see that there was something very strong going on there. Roose Bolton as well, I think, talks about it. She clearly had a very strong bond with horses. Now, perhaps she just was a naturally talented horsewoman, but I do like the idea that there was potentially some sort of warging link going on there. The point you make about the reason why is because this isn't just she's quite good with horses. It sort of goes beyond that, as if it's almost kind of anthropomorphizing. It's this idea of being like a centaur, is that, that makes it sound like she was at one with the horse in a way. But with the Knight of the Laughing Tree, so she took on as the Knight of the Laughing Tree in jousting 3 knights effectively, and unseated all of them and won, and that seems a little bit precocious. She was still relatively young. She obviously hadn't been allowed to do lots of jousting before. She was clearly good on a horse, but and she was clearly good at fighting. Another brand vision is of her play fighting with her brother Benjen, so clearly this is something she's grown up doing. Clearly there's a chance of a natural talent, but yes, again, it's indicative, the fact that she could immediately go in there without ever, as far as we're aware, having done this before, suddenly be able to defeat 3 knights does suggest something more. And if she did have a sort of a warging bond, or a way to sort of reach out to other horses, then that perhaps could have given her some sort of unnatural advantage. We don't know, but I like the idea, and it does seem to work with her character and with the history of House Stark, in that the entire generation below are all wargs. Ned, we don't hear of anything. We sort of look out for it, but we can't see it huge amounts. We don't hear of anything with Brandon. We don't hear of anything in particular with Benjen. So you do have to wonder, where does this come from? Does it just skip generations? It would make sense if Lyanna did indeed have some, or some of those Starks had some latent warging abilities. Dage Page saying maybe Ned had potential but blocked it out after the trauma of the rebellion. He seems plagued with guilt and metaphorical dreams in his point of view. Loras is an expert jouster based on skill alone. So with Ned, we don't know. We simply don't know, and there's no hint. We do go inside his mind, obviously, for his POV chapters. We don't seem to see any hints of it in him, it has to be said. It's the kind of thing we're looking out for, which is there. Loras is indeed an expert jouster, but he grew up in an area, Highgarden and the Reach, that jousting is what they're about. This is the chivalry. He was brought up to be jousting, whereas Lyanna, the idea with Lyanna is that she was not expected to do that. It was frowned upon if she would be trying it, and frankly, At Winterfell, they didn't do jousting. that's not the kind of thing that they were doing. We know that Ned grew up very much with this strong idea, which he must have had from his childhood, is that actually, if you take part in tourneys, then you're just showing your strengths and weaknesses to opponents, and if you ever have to fight them, then they might be able to take advantage of that extra information. So he was very much of the view that you shouldn't be taking part in tourneys anyway, and it's noticeable that the Starks generally didn't take place in tourneys. So there's a slight difference there. Arcanix 1971 talking about Lyanna here, saying she was witted in Robin Hobb's terms. Yes, I do like that idea, and clearly, for those who don't know, the Farseer trilogy, or no trilogy, but her stories have got lots of echoes across to A Song of Ice and Fire, and George R. R. Martin and Robin Hobb very close as writers. So it does kind of make sense that his understanding of how warging operates might also reflect her understanding of how being witted, which is the same kind of thing, operates in her world. Rudy H saying, hi Robert, love the hair. Thank you very much. It might be the last day you see the hair. I'm hoping I have time to get it cut tomorrow, so it's starting to get just too much, but thank you. Do you think the Crypt Starks will play a role in the Winds of Winter in the fight against the White Walkers? I have got a lot of questions on this coming up, Rudy, so I will definitely be answering this. Just in terms of the specifics there, I don't think this is going to be in the Winds of Winter. I think that the Winds of Winter, as far as Winterfell and the Starks are concerned, the Winds of Winter is about getting them back into Winterfell, re-establishing themselves, and then taking a breath and turning to face the oncoming others. That is going to be the action in the Winds of Winter. The dead Starks, in whichever way they do come to defend the Starks, and I think that they will definitely, that I think is going to be in A Dream of Spring. That is, in my view, the Winterfell crypts are they're a defense mechanism which was built in right from the time that they started up. But as I say, I will build on that a little bit more later. But yes, they definitely will play a role. I suspect it's not going to be in the very next book. I think that we need to get the Starks back into Winterfell first. Lots of comments about the hair. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the hair love. It's just getting a bit much, unfortunately. The Sam Klontz, the second question from Patreon, saying, my question is, where are all the Starks? For them to be such an old house, how is it that their line is reduced to this one family? Was there a Dance of Dragons or Summerhall level catastrophe that wiped them out? Really interesting question. So yes, we are, at the time of the story, we are sort of down to this one family that we've got there. The extent to which this is why Benjen had to be up at Winterfell during the whole Robert's Rebellion, and he hung around for until Robb Stark was also there as well, so that he knew that he could then go up to the wall, because he wanted to make sure that there were Starks there and didn't want to abandon his duty. So yes, this has come down to one. Now, some of that is just the way of it in terms of if you look at the family, there were, of course, 4 siblings. Benjen went to the wall. Brandon died before having any children, or at least any children that we're aware of. Lyanna obviously died young. She did have a child, but in secret, and that therefore left just Ned to be producing the next generation. He did quite a good job. He had 5 children, but so that there were 4, and then there were 5 again on the next generation. But when you get before that, it is just there there were only a couple of children the generation before that. And when you go before that, yes, there was a Stark succession crisis. Now, we don't yet know all of the details about this, but hopefully soon we will. But this appears to be the plot or the background plot to the next Dunk and the Egg story, which is tentatively titled The She-Wolves of Winterfell. And what happened was that, yes, there were a couple of deaths because of fights with the Ironborn, which led to an uncertainty about who exactly should be inheriting, and that's the situation that Dunk and Egg are going to be going up and getting themselves involved in. So yes, there was not one sort of summer hall style event, but the family was cut down by wars and other circumstances, and earlier than that, there are other offshoots from the Starks. It's not like there were no other Starks, but they sort of married off into other families, and even the Car Starks, for example, were an offshoot from the Starks, and it's just that this the ruling family, as it were, did get caught by a series of deaths all happening at the same time. But yeah, then Rickard had four children. Ned had 5 children. So they were carrying on producing. Mara Lee saying this was a super chat before we went live, saying just a show of appreciation and support for both channels. Love all the fabulous stories on the Well Told Tale. Thank you, dear Robert, for everything you do and for all the fabulous content and stories. And also, you sent a super sticker, Mara. Thank you. Mara. Thank you. I do hugely appreciate your support, and thank you for talking about the Well Told Tale. I will mention that a little bit more partway through the stream. You also asked about the sword Ice, how it got forged, who had it initially, was it always in the hands of the king or the Warden of the North? Well, the background to this is that the sword that we know of as Ice, this is a ceremonial sword. So whereas a lot of the Valyrian steel swords that houses in Westeros are intended for combat, Ice never was. This is a long ceremonial sword, and it is, as Ned used it, and we saw him use it, it is used for beheadings and meting out justice and all the rest of it. This is a Valyrian steel sword, so it came from Valyria. We don't know exactly when or how, but given the doom of Valyria is about 400 years before the story, somewhere a little bit before that, there was this glut of Valyrian steel swords which all made their way across into Westeros. So this was one of the ones that it would have been extremely expensive, but it was one of the ones that came across there. So was it always in the hands of the king or the Warden of the North? Yes. Once it was there, it absolutely was. Now, there are people within the sort of the more symbolic focused parts of the Song of Ice and Fire fandom who speculate that perhaps this isn't the original sword Ice. Maybe there was another one before this one. Maybe even it's the sword Dawn, which is, as we know, all the way down now with House Dayne. I can't see the evidence for that. I absolutely accept the fact that there may be some symbolism that suggests this, but in terms of the actual sword that we know, this is a lot more recent as far as Stark history goes. There may well have been a sword beforehand, but then you have to ask yourself, where did it go? If they went and got this new sword what could possibly have prompted them to be parting with it if this is an ancestral sword that was around even longer than that? Higa Hergus, thank you very much, saying excellent as always and something for the haircut fund. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Lady Pushkins says, do you think the Warg King warged into one of the Starks? So this is in relation to Stark history. Now, we tend to think of House Stark as having always been there and the big house in the north, the rulers of all of the north, the kings of winter. That's not how they were from the beginning. When they started out right back at the time of Bran the Builder, they were one amongst many. There are 100 petty kings all the way across the north, and in fact, there's evidence that the Starks probably weren't even the biggest and most powerful. House Blackwood may well have been. Certainly, they where they're settled Raventree Hall now. Their Weirwood Tree seems immense, even bigger than the one at Winterfell, which seems to imply that they're that there was some huge magic going on there as a basis, which certainly plays into the role that House Blackwood seems to be playing in the family trees later on in the story. Bloodraven, for example, is half Blackwood. But the Starks weren't always the rulers of the north. Over a matter of centuries, millennia, one by one, they pushed back, married into, killed, expelled all of the other petty kingdoms. And we don't know huge amounts about the information we get is from the World of Ice and Fire, which sort of skirts through this. They probably don't have huge amounts of information about it, and we therefore don't either. But one of the kings that were defeated by the Starks were the Warg Kings. Now, it's pretty likely, I suspect, that a lot of these families which were sort of got rid of by the Starks weren't just killed off, but they were intermarried. I suspect that's what happened there, rather than the Wargs warging into some Starks and then they are being, taking control of the Starks from that moment onwards. I personally suspect what actually happened was that there was an intermarriage, and then what followed from that was that the warging genes, as it were even stronger in the Starks than they were to start with. So that's my personal take on what's going on with that. And the same thing probably happened with the Marsh Kings, with who was in the neck at the time. So I think that there's a lot of intermarriage that was going on all the way through. Catherine Furseth says, House Stark has such a long history that parts of it is bound to be shrouded in myth and mystery. Which part of their house history do you find most fascinating and why? I think the stuff that we don't know about the start of the house, that's the bit that absolutely fascinates me. And I talked about Bran the Builder earlier, but it's this how you get this family who clearly are very involved in the fight against the others, the First Long Night and all the rest of it. They get set up at a place by a weirwood tree and with the hot springs. That's where they make their base. Over time, Winterfell kind of happens up and around them. Bits are built at various different points in time, but it's that starting point that I find fascinating. Before Winterfell was Winterfell, when Winterfell was a weirwood tree, some crypts and maybe a small tower above it, that is the point which I find fascinating, because that was a deliberate decision to plant themselves there where they were. Why? Was it a purely House Stark thing? Was there a connection with the children of the others? Why that specific place? So many questions. don't think we're ever going to get the full answers to them, but I find that establishment of the house is the most fascinating thing. Connected to this, Jazz Singh says, "Hi Robert, what do you think are the origins behind the phrase there should always be a Stark in Winterfell? Bonus points if it's steeped in magic." Well, I think it is steeped in magic. The phrase latterly, my take is that it has been used by the Starks in a kind of a realpolitik way to make sure that they stay in power. I think that is an undeniable fact, and why wouldn't you? There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. This is the kind of thing, well, of course we need to be ruling, because, you know, this ancient saying that this has to happen. But the more I look at this, the more I think this is connected in with the origin of the Starks, which, as I say, is this thing that fascinates me. And the idea that there must always be a Stark there implies that the house, the line of Starks, have to be at Winterfell in order to fulfill their duty or role in some way. Now, what happens to the Starks? If there always are Starks in Winterfell, they will always be buried in Winterfell. So actually what is happening with there must always be a Stark in Winterfell is not just the Starks are staying there in power, but you are creating in the crypts of Winterfell generation after generation after generation of these dead Starks. And we'll come on to the crypts. Well, we're moving into it now, but they are immensely important in the books symbolically, much more so than on the show. When we go down there, the statues are the amount of times just in a few pages when Ned and Robert Baratheon go down there, the statues are anthropomorphized to be looking at Ned, to be listening, to be judging him. It's very clear that this is the embodiment of what it is to be Stark, is down there in those crypts. Theon doesn't feel like he belongs. It's not his place. Of course, he's not a Stark. But the Starks themselves do feel very happy there. It's this, for me, is the key to that phrase, is that this is an attempt to make sure that over millennia, the Starks stay based there and carry on filling up the crypts, because that was what Winterfell was. Winterfell was not the castle. Winterfell was the crypt. That was what was first built. And Eric Fogg with the follow-up question saying, what are the ramifications of there not having been a Stark in Winterfell for quite a while now? Following my train of logic, actually not a lot. Because this isn't a matter of there must always be a Stark, and if there isn't a Stark, then that triggers some magical effect or nothing like that. There's nothing. When Bran and Rickon left, meaning that there were no Starks in Winterfell, that didn't suddenly trigger anything that we see. The others were already moving before that. The dragons had been hatched. This was not a trigger moment of great magical import. What it did mean, though, is that the Starks weren't there, and I think that the Starks do need to be there in order to be triggering this defense mechanism that we'll talk about in just one moment. I did have another super chat. See if I can find it. Vividest Pink, thank you so much. Saying, no question, just wanted to thank you for the comfort and engagement your content provides during this hard time. Well, thank you. It's the kind of feedback that really touches me. If I can provide comfort and engagement for those who need it, then I'm very, very happy, Robert. So thank you very much for that. Nicola Jurican, I just spotted your question in the chat saying, did Bloodraven send the dire wolves where he was certain the Starks would find them? I think that's entirely possible, yes. We don't know about that, but the fact that there is a dire wolf south of the wall is certainly very suspicious, particularly when you realise what dire wolf cubs there are, and I think that he was very clear in wanting to make sure that the Starks would create that warging bond with a direwolf. So yes, I think that almost certainly was him. Let's get on to Winterfell and the Crypts. Henning J, I know what you said over on Patreon, that you don't buy into the theory about the statues, which I'll very quickly run through so that I can then get to your question. The idea is that the Starks have been burying their dead in the Winterfell crypts for a long time, generation after generation after generation, and each of the Winterfell kings, lords of Winterfell, get their statue. And when we're told, that the Starks are there and judging and all the rest of it, and as I say, it's not just Ned who feels it, Theon who feels it, Jon does when in his dreams. It's everyone who goes down there seems to think this. It's the statues that are the ones that are there, being judgmental, seeing things, and all the rest of it. And the idea of statues coming to life is something that we see across the piece in A Song of Ice and Fire. We talk about foreshadowing, and there is so much of it, so many mentions across the piece. The legends of the Titan of Braavos, the great statue of Braavos coming to life at the time of greatest danger for Braavos. You get the stone men, who are statues that are alive, as it were. They're across the piece. There's these images of statues coming to life, gargoyles. It's part of the Azor Ahai myth that we know about, stone dragons being brought to life. So this is something which is right in the big ethos of what A Song of Ice and Fire is this concept of statues coming to life, and we have not yet seen it happen. Thematically, yes, we get stone dragon eggs giving birth to dragons, but actually in terms of statues, not yet. So which statues are there that we are told about again and again and again? Which statues are they that we're even encouraged to consider as being almost human and containing a spirit? The statues down in Winterfell. If you're interested in the theory, I've unpacked a whole lot of other evidence in there as well. Then you'll find it somewhere on the channel. Do go and have a look for it. It's called, I released it at some point earlier this year, and it's called something like the statues in Winterfell crypts will come to life, something along those lines. So have a look at it. But Henning J says, I often think it's more fun to challenge theories with a different view than to agree on everything. And I absolutely agree. I love it when my views are challenged. This is how we improve our understanding of things. So here is my challenge. You argued that the Stark statues will come to life and fight against the others. Does this mean that another element, like Earth, is added to the Ice and Fire saga? Or do the statues still just represent ice? I'm a believer in a bigger role of Euron, so when his ambitions get noticed by the main POV characters, is the element of water added as well. In this is the story then about the elements of nature: fire, ice, earth, water, air, so on, so on. I think my logic that the statues will come to life stands regardless of this. Is George R. R. Martin trying to create a sort of an elemental feel to the stories that he's writing? To a degree, yes, but it's more about ice and fire, and ice is not one of the kind. It's not we get air, water, earth, and fire. The main four elements. Ice is not one of them. That's, I suppose it could be water, but that's not exactly the same thing. So I don't think that is what he is doing. He is not creating different groupings all of which have got aligned with specific elements. That's not the way that this seems to be working. We have got two elemental forces. This is building on the Robert Frost poem that we all know and love, ice and fire, both of which could destroy the land. And it actually doesn't matter which one it is. Both can equally destroy the land. And this is about the balance, finding the balance between those two. Yes, there are elements of magic that are more watery. There are elements of magic that seem more fiery. There are elements of magic that seem lots of different things, but I don't think George R. R. Martin is creating specific Avatar The Last Airbender kind of idea of there being specific elements of types of magic. They all seem to be playing in or tapping into the one thing ultimately, except possibly the Children of the Forest in a kind of a more nature-y way. So I hope that makes sense. I think that this doesn't undermine my concept of the statues. In fact, it wasn't initially my concept. I should probably say one of the things that I do for my patrons at different levels, you get different advantages at the $30 level, then get a chance to have a sort of a quick chat and do a bespoke thing. And what one of my patrons said was there any chance I could do a video on the statues in the Winterfell crypts? And so I did some research on that, and that's where that theory came from. So it's not my original idea, although I think that I did put my own twist on it. Couple of super chats. Esteban Estrada, thank you so much, saying no question, just want to contribute since I'm new and I've been watching your older videos. Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Thank you. And I had one more, I think. Yeah, Giga Chad, thank you so much, saying, do you think Bran's dream of a weirwood and a crow are different entities? Bloodraven appears to Bran as a weirwood in the dream and doesn't know what Bran is talking about when Bran asks if Bloodraven is the crow. Right, so yeah, I think the thing which is underneath this question is this actually Bloodraven who is appearing as the three-eyed crow in Bran's visions? And I think absolutely categorically yes. Again, I've done a video on this. The confusion often comes in the fact that when Bran meets him, he says, are you the three-eyed crow? And Bloodraven doesn't immediately go, yes, that's me. But no, that's not how this astral plane thing works. You do not know. This is a thing, we're not told it, but this is very clear. What happens is you do not know how you appear to somebody else in the astral plane. You do not decide what your own avatar looks like. Your own avatar happens to you, and it is representative of you. And so Bloodraven says, oh, yes, well, actually, that does make sense if that's me. And so that's what that conversation is going on. Bran did not know that he was the winged wolf being held down by chains, but that was what the Reed children were going to have a look for. They were going to Winterfell to try and find the winged wolf. So you do not know yourself what you look like when you're there. So yes, I think that the crow definitely was Bloodraven. The idea that the weirwood and the crow are different entities because you see the crow in the weirwood and then flying out, and you kind of hear from the weirwood. I think that for me, that's overanalyzing it. As I say, I have done a video looking at this very specific issue, but everything that happens to Bran shows that this was Bloodraven calling him up there. He sends out cold hands as well. He sends his people out to build on this, the Reeds as well. They're all there doing a part of this. If this was not Bloodraven, then none of these people would have been also in on the act. Bloodraven was calling to Bran in his dreams, so that's what's going on there. Bo Barnett, this is going back to questions from my patrons, saying, Bo Barnett says, Robert, like you, I believe the statues, this is the statues in Winterfell Crypts, will come alive to battle the others. I believe the other dead Starks will also rise. The statues mirror the others, and the remaining dead mirror the whites. Would like your thoughts. So I like that idea. So all of, and this is building actually misapprehension that some people have about the Crypts, is it's only the Stark kings and lords who get buried down there. All the Starks get buried down there. We hear of the Stark children playing in their own graves, effectively. They will all be buried down there. It's just that the statues are only for the kings and lords of Winterfell. Would the other Starks rise? Well, possibly, but the one of the things about the statues is that it creates a physical body for the dead Starks now, and a physical body that will last through the millennia as well. Now, if they just rise as spirits, how are the spirits going to be defending the Starks against an undead army? They're not going to scare the whites at all. They're not going to be able to attack the whites. They actually don't have a huge amount of purpose. What is needed is a physical army of giants rising from the earth, which is what would happen. The statues are always described as big, huge, looking down on people. When you reach out your hand, you just touch the knee, that kind of thing. So these are giant statues. Might the spirits of other dead Starks also rise? It's possible, but I don't think that they're part of the army per se. I've talked quite a few times about the dead men of Dun Harrow, which is a Lord of the Rings concept. If you remember from the films, Aragorn goes and collects this army of the dead who then come out and fight for him. And I think that there is an element of that here in what George R. R. Martin's doing, but the dead men of Dun Harrow, they were just a spectral army, an army of ghosts, and they played their part by scaring living people, and that's how they won their battle. They scared away the Corsairs of Umber, which allowed Aragorn to get the boats to go up and help relieve Minas Tirith. So that was what they did. They just used the fact that they were ancient ghosts to scare away bad guys. That would not work against the whites or the others. A couple of questions. I think I had a couple more questions from the chat. Katie Smith, thank you, saying, do you think we will ever get a definitive answer about what's in the caved-in portion of the crypts? Do you think something important is hidden there? Which is excellent timing, because actually the very next question I've got lined up from my patrons was from Devyani, saying, does your theory still stand about the reason why part of the crypts are blocked off or caved in, or has it changed since your last video on this subject? So the caved in section of the Winterfell crypts needs a sip of water first. This is the oldest part of the crypts. Right down at the bottom, it filled up from the crypts, filled up from the bottom and headed upwards. So this is where the oldest Starks are. We don't know how much exactly, but a portion of the older parts of the crypts are caved in. Question is why? To me, it's always sounded as if this is a deliberate cave-in. The crypts are millennia old, but we never hear of anyone tripping up over some loose flagstones or being a little bit of masonry falling down. We never hear that the structure is bad in any way, shape, or form. It seems to be an incredibly well-made and well-preserved set of crypts, except for a part where there's a cave-in. We don't actually ever see this. We just hear that it's the case. So, what might this mean? Somebody at some point wished to hide the oldest part of the crypts, where the first few Starks were buried, where the first few statues are. Again, we don't know exactly how many. My guess is that if we take this principle, this idea that the Starks are there must always be a Stark in Winterfell because they are building an army in the crypts from the bottom upwards. What happens if that army is called upon only a little while into its existence of being created, a few generations in? I think that is what has happened. We have the story of the Night's King. And with the story of the Night's King, this was the story of apparently the 13th Lord Commander. This seems to imply that the Night's Watch have been around there for a few years, a few generations perhaps, and the Wall presumably has been there for a while, so this is a little while after Bran the Builder. So House Stark, Winterfell has been there for a little while, a few generations. And what happens? The Starks go to fight the Night's King, who is this, at least consorting with the others, seems to be what was going on there. The Horn of Winter is blown, and what do we hear about the Horn of Winter? Well, two things. The Wall, it brings the Wall down. No reports that the Wall actually came down, so that bit's probably a lie or an exaggeration. Or we hear on, I think, 8 separate occasions that it calls forth giants from the earth. And the Horn of Winter was blown at the time of the 13th Lord Commander. Giants from the earth sounds suspiciously to me like bringing forth from the earth the Starks in their army, the giant statues coming forth from the earth. So what happens when they have done their bit, when they have helped win that battle against the Night's King? What then? You cave in the last bit of the crypts and you start building again, because the others are still there. They might come back and you start building the army once more. There's also the other element that the Night's King quite possibly could have been a Stark, and we're told that his name was expunged from history. As he was a Stark, presumably he would have been buried in the crypts. And how do you make sure that nobody ever knows about him? Cave in there. So there's lots of reasons going on there, but I think for me that is what it is. It's to shut off that last bit, the earliest bit, and then start building again from there. Will we get a definitive answer on that? I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's entirely possible that we will. Alejandro Martinez saying, no question, just Stark adjacent commentary. Barbary Dustin is kind of fun. Thanks for all you do, Robert. Thank you. Yes, she is. For those who don't know Barbary Dustin, she's an excellent character. She's a book-only character. She has a bit of backstory to do with the Starks, quite a lot of backstory to do with the Starks. She was Brandon Stark's lover. Then she married... she was a Ricewell. She married Lord Dustin. Lord Dustin went off with Ned Stark on a magnificent red stallion. He went to the Tower of Joy, died. Ned Stark brought the stallion back, but not the body of Lord Dustin. This is a double slap in the face because Ned brought back the body of his own sister, but decided to leave Lord Dustin's body there. The Dustins, they are the family of the North most synonymous with the dead and burying the dead. They live in the Barrowlands. The house home is atop the Great Barrow. This is everything about it, and Ned did not bring back the body. And not only did he not bring back the body, he destroyed all evidence of where the body was, the Tower of Joy. He destroyed the Tower of Joy and never told anyone where it was. So Barbary Dustin couldn't even send people down to collect the bones herself. Ned would not do that. So this was a huge slap in the face, and she bears the grudge against him 2 decades later. When she comes up to Winterfell, and she's in Winterfell towards the end of the story that we've got. And she makes it very clear that if Ned's bones, which we last saw heading up north to go to Winterfell, if they arrive, she is going to stop them, and she is going to grind them down into dust, and she's going to make sure that they never, ever make it back to Winterfell. So she's a good, not a character we should necessarily be cheering on, but she is a fun character, and she has some great lines as well. Did I have? I think I did have another couple of questions somewhere, if I can find them. Lauren T says, thank you for the super chat, saying Sansa seems destined to wed, to be subverted in light of Littlefinger's matchmaking. Do you predict any successful future Stark marriages? Successful future Stark marriages? No. I can't see this at all. Arya's not going to marry. Bran and Rickon are both too young to be marrying. Bran wouldn't marry anyone anyway, I suspect, and Rickon is certainly not going to live long enough to be marrying anyone, which just leaves Sansa. And Sansa, in the books, she is being in the process of being married off to this guy called Harry Harding, Harry the Heir. This is all part of Littlefinger's big plan to get both the Vale and also the North, and probably also the Riverlands, under his control through Sansa. And if he can marry her off to Harry the Heir, then that's great. I don't think that this is going to last. I don't think that he is going to be as bad as Ramsay Bolton was to her, but that's clearly quite a low bar to get over. And I think that she will end up getting rid of him herself as part of her growth, as it were, into being a player of the game, not just somebody who is being pushed around by other players of the game. So no, I don't think there will be any happy Stark marriages at any point soon. Maura Lee, thank you so much. Oh, hi there, Mara Lee. I keep on mispronouncing your name. I apologize. I'm trying to say it correctly. Just with a super sticker saying thanks for being you. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I did answer one of your questions a little bit earlier. I'm not sure whether you were here for that. And Lauren T, thank you so much for saying PS. Thank you for the wonderful content. Thank you very much. And also a super sticker from Ariel Winchester. Thank you very much. Just saying thank you. I appreciate that too. Have a quick look. Lots of people asking about the destruction of the Tower of Joy. This is one of those things that some people assume that because this is one of Ned's memories, that this is part of the fever dream that George R.R. Martin has told us that we shouldn't be taking literally true. It's not part of the fever dream. It's very clear that he then wakes up and he has some reflections while he's alive, awake and lucid, one of which was his memory of tearing it down brick by brick. And then using the stones to bury the bodies in cairns. So yes, he definitely did do it. Was he just being paranoid? Quite sort of. The way I would see it is he was wanting to make sure that he did absolutely everything to just draw a line under this, to protect this newborn baby. He didn't want anyone knowing where the Tower of Joy was. He didn't want anyone, obviously the people who were around the area, House Fowler, who guard the Prince's Pass, would have known where it was, but and others like the Danes would, but random people searching for it, no. He didn't want people knowing where the bodies were buried. He didn't want people asking about what happened there. He just wanted to destroy every bit of evidence, tie off every kind of loose end that he could, and then head off to the north and ideally never leave it again. That plan didn't quite work, but that's the idea. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. So Dolores Alex saying, "Hey Robert, what do you think happened to Benjen Stark? There's a theory that he might have been a warg and warged into someone or something at the time of his death. Similarly to Jon warging into Ghost, could he have warged into Cold Hands? If Cold Hands' physical body was that of a white before Benjen took it over, it would explain how Cold Hands could have been killed long ago, yet still be Benjen. This would also explain Cold Hands' behavior towards Bran, etc. I would love to hear your thoughts on this." Okay, so Cold Hands is just a book-only character who does a lot of the things that we see Benjen do on the show. And this is actually one of those times when we've got sort of like a curious clarification from George R.R. Martin. We've got some pages. I honestly can't remember where these came out from, but they're sort of out in the public now, so I don't think this is at all spoilery. But we get some pages of text when George R. Martin was drafting something, sent it to its editor. His editor was asking some questions in the margin, and George R. R. Martin was scribbling replies to them. Most of them were pretty mundane, but one of them was about Cold Hands. And the editor said, "I think this is Benjen. Is this Benjen?" And George R. R. Martin just simply wrote, "No." So that, I think we take that as confirmation that this is not Benjen. I like this idea. It works well that this is that Benjen warged into a sort of a dead or near dead body, a white or something like that. If he had that ability, we didn't hear that he had that ability. My take is that Cold Hands is much more likely to be one of the Raven's Teeth, the Blood Raven's personal guard, who went up with him and joined the Night's Watch at the same time that he joined the Night's Watch, some of whom went sort of north of the Wall at the same time as him. And it makes sense. Blood Raven got plugged into the tree. It makes sense that he would have kept them, his loyal lieutenants, around with him if he possibly could, using some kind of weirdy magic. So that seems to be what's going on there, is that this is a loyal lieutenant for Bloodraven north of the Wall. What happened to Benjen is an entirely different question. We do not know, and this is one of those things that George R. R. Martin may just drop on us. I think we probably will meet him on the way, Bran's way south, back down towards Winterfell. My guess is that he might well have actually still been alive. This is just me speculating, is that we take what we saw on the show as being like, oh, so he died and sort of like has come back sort of like a white, and therefore he can't cross over the wall. That is because they merged the characters of Cold Hands and Benjen on the show. We shouldn't take that as exactly what happened. What if, this is a big if, what if Benjen survived, the others died, but he survived, and he went hunting for what's really going on? He thought he could just go back to the Wall, but he wanted to find out more. What if he headed north? This is a thought I had. I'm doing a video. It's going to be an epic length video with the working title of "Just How Long is the Winds of Winter going to be?" And I've been trying to map out how many chapters it's going to have, based purely on what we know, what plot we know has to happen in the Winds of Winter. The short answer is it's going to be massive, which is why George R. R. Martin is still writing it. But one of the things that sort of fell out from that I didn't have a chance to sort of expand on was that George R. R. Martin has confirmed that we will see further north in the Winds of Winter than we have before. And we've gone pretty far north already. We've gone as far as the Fist of the First Men. We've seen that through Jon's eyes. And Sam as well. We've been sort of following them off with that great ranging. But so how are we going to see further north than that? So there's two options that I could see. Option number one is just Bran astrally projecting himself up there, seeing we're going to see everything through his vision. That's possible. And that, frankly, was what I thought was most likely for a very long time. And then the thought just crossed my mind, what if Benjen's still alive? What if Benjen went north? What if we are going to have a POV chapter from Benjen's perspective? How mind-blowing would that be? George R. R. Martin does this. Another one of the things which came out when I was sort of working my way through that video, every single book so far, he's introduced new POV characters we weren't expecting. So who's going to be introduced this time? Is he going to change it and not introduce any new characters? Well, the only bit of plot that we know we are going to get, that we know that we haven't got a POV character who is going to be there, is going even further north than possible. Is it possible that we're going to see this through Benjen's eyes? I don't know. It's speculation, but the thought is lodged up there, and I suspect it's not going to go away. Maybe it'll even turn into a video at some point. But yeah, so that's a bit of a digression, but I don't think we have to assume that Benjen is this kind of half-dead, undead character that we see on the show. That is what they did lots of times on the show. They merged a couple of characters into one. They merged Benjen and Cold Hands into one character in the same way that they merged Edric Storm with Gendry. The two characters came together, merged into one. That was a bit of a digression there, but hopefully that sort of and Mara Lee, I know that you were also asking about Benjen, so that hopefully that one answers that for you as well. I think I had another question in the chat. Let me see if I can find. Oh yeah, here we go. So the Stark in Winterfell. Thank you very much. Do you think Brandon, Ned's brother, has children? Do you think we'll meet any, or they'll have a role to play? Well, I think the answer to the last bit of that is no. I don't think we'll meet them or they'll have a role to play. Does he have any? He may well have done. He certainly seems to have quite a high libido from what we've heard of him. There was he certainly had at least one lover, Barbary Ricewell, before he got engaged, betrothed to Catelyn Stark. There's every reason for thinking that he may well have had more. So yes, there's the possibility of him having children. If they turn up, yes, that could be an interesting little slant on the who's best placed to inherit Winterfell, but I don't think there's a need for them to, and they certainly haven't thus far, when perhaps it would have been a good time for them to come forward. So no, I don't think. Yes, he may have children, but I don't think we're going to be seeing them. Zaira Mina, thank you so much for the super chat. Just saying, just wanted to say I love your content and want to show a little bit of support so you can keep the content coming. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. Question from Alejandro Martinez saying, prior to Howland, what was the Stark-Reed relationship? Interesting question. Again, this is one of those things where the honest answer is we don't know. They were loyal bannermen. But one of the fascinating things about House Reed is quite how out of the history books they are. We know the names of only 4 members of House Reed ever. Howland, Jojen, Mira, and Howland's wife, Gianna. So that's it. What happened before then? Presumably there were other members of House Reed going back through the centuries. We're not told, because they kept themselves to themselves. They certainly, the Starks didn't view them badly in any way. It's very clear from Lyanna's reaction to Howland Reed that she certainly felt that the Reeds were a loyal, they were loyal bannermen that the Starks should be protecting and standing up for. So the relationship appears to have been strong, but there's although yes, I think there are, and there's always people in the chat who've got greater knowledge of the detail than me on this one. I think that there was some intermarriage between the Reeds and the Starks back in the family tree, which seems to imply sort of a level of closeness. They're not the kind of family who would be called on to be joining huge armies and wars and all the rest of it. Their role was protecting the North in the neck, and they did a very good job of it. So that was what it was. I think that there was a strong and positive relationship, but we don't have the detail of anything above and beyond that. Reflective Rambling, thank you so much for the super chat, and also thank you for picking up on a question from someone else. I love it when people do this. Saying for Maggie Tall or Tail, Welkin, do you think House Stark has origins in the Great Empire of the Dawn? So the Great Empire of the Dawn is an ancient empire which is back. It was geographically where Yi Ti is nowadays, and sort of expanding out beyond that. They are very mysterious. We don't get huge amounts of information about them, but from the world of Ice and Fire, it's very clear that there are legends from that time that mirror across to the legends of the Last Hero, legends of Azor Ahai, and all the rest of it. So it seems to have been around that sort of time. Now, might the Starks have come from there? Personally, I suspect not. I think that the Starks were part of the First Men, and the First Men were a group of humans who came across from Essos, across what was then the Arm of Dawn, into the bottom of Westeros, and slowly over generations and generations and generations worked their way north. And the Starks seem to have been, simply by a matter of geography, they seem to have been some of the First Men who pushed furthest. So they are presumably some of the first men to be doing that. Might they have come from the Great Empire of the Dawn? If they did, it is so many millennia ago that it doesn't really matter, I think. The family that is more likely from out of all of Westeros to come from there, if only from their colouring, is probably House Dayne. But the Starks know, I think, that they are first men rather than from the Great Empire of the Dawn. And I had another question from Robert Tabrizi. Thank you very much. Saying, do you believe the final fight with the others will happen at Winterfell as it did on the show? And if it does, do you believe Fagon will be involved? Okay. No. Personally, I think Fagon will be dead by that point. I think that he will be dead in opposition to Daenerys, who is launching her invasion. He will be in King's Landing, and then she will arrive, and they will have a confrontation down in the south. This is while the others are starting to threaten properly from the north. So I think he will die, and then Daenerys will turn her attention to the north and will be involved in what's going on. In terms of whether the final confrontation is going to be with at Winterfell, I move around a bit on this. They will get at least as far as Winterfell. The others, that much is sure. I think that the final confrontation, for me, probably is more likely to happen right at the center in the Riverlands. There's this area around the Isle of Faces, Harrenhal, the Inn at the Crossroads, where everything seems to be focused in on that as the center of all of the action. So I think that is probably where this is all going to end. And in terms of a final battle, I think we have to think about it as slightly more about a final confrontation. I've said it a number of times, so I'm not going to go through all of the logic again, but this is a matter not just of, can the humans amass a big enough army with the right weapons to be fighting and killing the big bad others? That is not how the pacifist George R. R. Martin is going to show the ending of this story. The solution to all of this is just killing people. That's not really his style, I don't think. The solution is undoing the magic that created the others. And that, I think, will require the Isle of Faces. And Bran, and possibly Howland Reed. So that is what is needed, is the magic that created them to be undone in some way. And question from it's not a question so much, but thank you very much, Duff Cody, just saying, keep up the great work, Robert. Thank you. Andrew K, yes, I've just spotted your point there, saying, interesting, one of the few times we have ice and fire mentioned together in the series was through Mira and Jojen's oath. Yes, so when they were swearing their oath of fealty to the Starks, they swore it by ice and fire. And that is one of the very few times we hear ice and fire mentioned together. And that is a hint, I think, to the fact that when I was saying, we don't know huge amounts about the relationship between the two, the Starks clearly are and have been the leaders of the North and the standard bearers for the holding the long watch against the others' return through Winterfell and all the rest of it. However, the North has not remembered. The North has forgotten. The place that probably does remember it probably is with the Cranach men, who are much, much more closely related to the Weirwood network and the Children of the Forest than anyone else in the North. So that is why House Reed, I suspect, has as part of their oath ice and fire. And it would not surprise me if that was a sort of some kind of link back all the way to the pact, the first pact between humans and the Children of the Forest. That's one more question from Stephen Dillon. Will we learn any more of Jacaris or Serra Snow? I don't think so. So this is way back in the Dance of the Dragons, actually. I mean, we might on the show. I don't know exactly when they're going to start with the show timeline. So we may do. I don't think we will in the books, though, I have to say. Robert Petit asking about whether Robb is Brandon's son. No, I don't think so. The timeline is very clear in terms of when Robb Stark was born. That this was to do with this was Ned's. So a lot of time passed after Brandon Stark died. So for Robb to be Brandon's son, he would have to be born at most 8 months after Brandon's death, because Brandon rode from Riverrun and then discovered what he discovered, and then rode from Riverrun all the way down to King's Landing, and then his Rickard followed, and then they were both killed. After that, then you get Ned, who tracks his way all the way through the Vale, through the mountains, gets a boat. The boat gets caught up in a storm. He gets shipwrecked. He has to catch another boat. Then he heads up through White Harbour up to Winterfell. He calls the Banners. Then from the Banners, calling the Banners, he then heads back down south, all the way through the north to Riverrun. That took months and months and months. In that time, Robert Baratheon had fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 battles at least. This was a long period of time. Robb Stark would have been born already by the point that Ned got there. Then Ned married Cat, and she became pregnant within those 2 weeks. So no is the short answer. Robb Stark. The timeline simply do not work for Robb to be Brandon's son, I'm afraid. Okay, let's just take a brief moment just to let you know what's happening going forward on this channel over the next couple of weeks. I've already mentioned actually the video that I'm doing about how big is the Winds of Winter. This is going to be quite a big video in and of itself, so I don't know when that's going to go live. I'm hoping at some point in the next couple of weeks. My Lord of the Rings content is carrying on. I've started doing my conversations that I do with other creators. My Secrets of series. I've got another couple of them that I want to get done, and after that I'm going to do a series just looking at the Lord of the Rings and some of the things at high level that perhaps if you're not a Tolkien nerd, but you're interested in it and just want a sort of an introduction, that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be doing in conversation with other content creators. So, for example, I literally just today I recorded with Dan, the voice of Geekdom, who's a fantastic channel. If you're interested in Lord of the Rings stuff, do go and check it out. But we were doing an overview of the Silmarillion. If you've ever wondered what the Silmarillion is about, been a little bit overawed about it because it is a bit of a hard read sometimes. If you just want to know an overview, that's what we're looking at there. But the content's coming on both A Song of Ice and Fire and Lord of the Rings. I'm going to carry on producing on both of those. The Well-Told Tale, I did just this last Wednesday a short story from Oscar Wilde called The Devoted Friend, which is a fantastic story. Loved it. It is both a morality tale and a critique of morality tales, which is a wonderful little thing. So if you're at all interested in that, this is my second channel, The Well-Told Tale, my audio narration channel. If you if you enjoy audio narrations of science fiction and fantasy stories, then please do go and check that out. Coming up next week will be Sinbad, the original story from 1001 Nights, which I'm really looking forward to. What else is going on? Patrons. Thank you, patrons. I say it all the time. I can't do what I do without your support, so thank you. If you are interested in being a patron, just supporting this channel, getting access to some of the stuff I do just for my patrons. I do audio recordings just for my patrons. As you've seen on the live stream, all patrons get a chance to ask a question that I will answer on the live streams. I frame my live streams around my patrons' questions. At $5 level, you also get access to all of the audio I produce for this channel. At $10 level, as well as getting a thank you down in the description, you also get a chance every now and then to vote on what I should be covering going forward. And what I'm covering today is as a result of one of those votes. My patrons wanted to look at different houses within the world of Ice and Fire, so that's what we're doing. So if you're at all interested in supporting the channel or getting access to those things, there is a link to my Patreon page down below. But thank you so much to Esteban Estrada for the super chat. Thank you. Saying, do you think readers will get a chance to make a connection other than what we have to the Stark House words that differ from the literal meaning? A lot of cool and interesting house words, but none like winter is coming. I think that the answer is that we know what they mean, and the readers understand that this isn't just it's going to get cold soon. This is about the others bring the winter with them. It's very clear that they, when they advance, they bring the cold air with them. They bring the darkness with them, and this isn't just about changing the sort of the what the weather is at the time. They're just bringing in climate change effectively. So that's what seems to be winter is coming. The other bit, the reason I paused for a long time just before answering that, is I was reminded recently actually by Bronsteris, who's going to be the next person on my Secrets of series next Wednesday. We were talking about Secrets of the Others, and he reminded me that the blurb on the back of the first edition of, I think it was the Clash of Kings, harks back to this thing that it's the first thing people tell you about. This is a world where the seasons are out of whack, and that very clearly says, and George R. Martin presumably greenlit it, that a long time ago something happened to put the seasons out of order and all the rest of it. And so that is tied in almost certainly with the first long night. So I think that when winter is coming, is this tying in with this is the way of the world that has been changed into winter is coming. When that magic gets undone, the Stark words no longer will have that more magical meaning to them. So I think that there's the House Stark, out of all of the houses, has got a sort of a lifespan for its original purpose. They were created, Bran the Builder created House Stark effectively at the same time as creating Winterfell, at the same time as creating the Wall, and their purpose in being there lasts as long as the others are there. And all of the warnings about winter is coming, there must always be a Stark and Winterfell, all of these tie in together to this purpose, and that purpose will end with the end of the others. So I don't think that we will get more of a take on this, but I think that we will see the beginnings of the seasons returning to how they ought to be. Okay, a question from Lily Mellon saying, "Hey Robert, hope you're well." I am, thank you. My question is about Rickon. It's been essentially fandom accepted that he's the Stark with the Shaggy Dog story that's most likely to die. Has there been any discussion previously about him becoming an Anastasia style of myth? He's so young when he was last seen by many that he might not be recognizable. For the record, I'm thinking more of the Russian royal family tale of potentially searching for him than I am of the Disney trope. Thank you. So, yes, Rickon was very young when he left Winterfell. The fact that, you know, people may think that he might now be unrecognizable, that people wouldn't be able to find him, yes, that's possible. But the thing, and with the show, we shouldn't always obviously take what it is as completely true of what's going to happen. I certainly don't think that's how Rickon will die. But I think one thing with that they did get right was that when he was brought in and Ramsay Bolton said something to the effect, well, that could be anyone. How can you prove that that's Rickon Stark? They then showed the head of Shaggy Dog, that they'd also killed the direwolf. So this actually is the way that people will know that this is Rickon Stark, because he's got a huge direwolf next to him. So that's the thing. And I think that Shaggy Dog will stay by Rickon's side all the way through to the end. So I think that is the most likely sort of course of events. Yes, of course, there will be, and there already have been, lots of misdirections about are the Stark children alive or dead and all the rest of it. We've got a fake Arya already. We've got Sansa pretending to be someone else. We've got Bran and Rickon are both believed to be dead because they've had bodies substituted for them. So all of the Starks have an element of that to them. Is it really them? So I don't think that Rickon's going down the Anastasia route, but because I think that he's so closely associated with Shaggy Dog. Sydney McCall saying, I was debating one of my friends the other day. He said that Ned should have at least told Catelyn about Jon's lineage, perhaps take an oath of silence in front of a weirwood tree, so that she wouldn't live with this misdirected anger towards Jon. I'm curious what your thoughts are. I tend to think that Cat probably still would have confided in her sister, who would have told Littlefinger. And also, did Ned have a long-term plan about telling Jon about his mother if he didn't decide to take the Black? So on that first bit, I think you have to accept that Ned didn't know Cat very well at all. He hadn't met her before he married. He knew her only for 2 weeks before he had to rush off back to war. So when he is making his promises to Lyanna, and he makes promises, not a promise, then his first thought is, oh, there's this person that I have to keep in the loop because of all because you know she's my wife, and I don't want her hating on this baby. That's not his thoughts. He doesn't know her at all, and what he was in the mode of at the time, as I mentioned a bit earlier, was every single loose end he's just closing down. Every clue he's just shutting down. He's not talking about it. He's destroying every bit of evidence that he can. No one has to know. And so he's not going to tell her. That's the way that he's going. He's like, almost like he buries all the memories deep down inside of him, and he refuses to talk about it. With retrospect, could he have? Perhaps. Would she have talked to her sister? Perhaps. That was a risk that he wasn't willing to take. Did he have a long-term plan to tell Jon about his mother if he didn't decide to take the Black? I think so. I think that one of the things he promised Lyanna was that he would tell Jon of his ancestry when he was older and it was safe to do so. I think that is why Ned then spoke to Benjen, which he did before Jon went up. I think that he thought for a moment and said, yes, perhaps this way will work. Then he spoke to Benjen. Benjen said that he was only going to talk to Jon after he'd taken his oath. So I think that was the point at which Ned said, okay, you tell him who he really is after Jon has sworn the oath and he is no longer a threat, because we know that Targaryens, Maester Aemon, Targaryens can live at the Wall and Robert Baratheon will not kill them. So that seems to be it. Was there a game plan? I don't know there was a specific game plan, but I think that Ned had promised and he would have told him at some point, just when he thought it was safe to do so. Purple Feline saying, I recently reread A Game of Thrones and was intrigued by how much there is that points to the others and the Starks being connected. Their words, winter is coming, is clearly supposed to be a warning about the others who currently live in the heart of winter, the lands of always winter. So it seems fair to say that the winter equals the others. We know before Aegon's conquest, the Starks called themselves the Kings of Winter and brandished a sword named Ice. How were the Starks involved in the creation of the others? And what do you think about the idea of that defeating the others is going to be a pact sealed with the Stark sacrifice? Now, I think that there's a good chance that the creation of the Winterfell was created or sealed by a Stark sacrifice. I think we have seen that perhaps through one of Bran's visions. I'll come on to that some other time. But we do see someone sacrificed before the weirwood tree. Is there a connection between them? Yes, almost certainly. The Starks are synonymous with ice. We don't know the precise details of how the others were created. I tend to the idea that it's close-ish to what happened on the show. So I don't think it was just like specifically maybe one person who was turned and then they turned others. But it seems that the others have a sort of a warped version of the sort of the Green Seer abilities, which the Starks obviously have in their blood somewhere along the line. Old Nan, with all of her talks about the Night's King perhaps being a Stark, it would not surprise me in the least if the original others came from, in some way, Stark involvement in this. So yes, there is a deliberate connection across here. The thing with the Starks, though, is that they are not their imagery, or the word imagery, I should say, I'll leave it to other people to talk about the symbolism, but the word imagery with the Starks and ice and winter is not them embodying it so much as conquering it or fighting it or acknowledging it's there. Winter is coming is not them saying, we are the winter. It is an acknowledgement that winter is there. Winterfell could be a number of different things, but it could mean the fall of winter, the death, the end of winter. The Kings of Winter is not we are serving winter. It is we are in charge of winter. So the language usage for the Starks and winter is more combative rather than embracing. Yes, they are representing ice, but also they are a place of warmth with the hot springs and all the rest of it. So there is a lot of clear linkage between the two, but I don't think that means that they are exactly the same. But this does lead into another question from Joanna Hepburn, saying, if Azor Ahai, Eldrick, Shadow Chaser, The Last Hero, etc., are all interpretations of the same myth, across the civilizations of Planetos. It seems too black and white for George R. R. Martin to interpret such a figure reborn as inherently good or bad. Do you think that such a figure represents a true champion of humanity, or is it more complicated than that? And if the others identify Jon as that person, do they see him as a destroyer or a redeemer? So this is fascinating. Whether Azor Ahai is a good character, whether the last hero is a good character, or all of the other versions of this are good characters, and the answer is not necessarily. When you start looking at all of these stories, what do we hear about Azor Ahai? Well, we don't actually get a story, a legend of Azor Ahai with a sword going, killing lots of others and saving humanity. That's not the story we read about. Yes, that's the implication of what happened next. But the story is when he was forging a sword, and the way that he had to forge this magical sword was by killing his lover. That doesn't sound like a purely good person. So it sounds like someone who's willing to sacrifice their lover in order to achieve what they consider to be a greater good. Similarly, when you get characters, sort of the stories we get from sort of Yi Ti and the Great Empire of the Dawn, again, they're not necessarily good characters. You get the Emperor over there, they kind of have it round as being perhaps he brought in the Long Night rather than the other way round. So yes, there's this monomyth that has been interpreted in different ways as there being a hero, a leader, but this hero or leader does appear to be on the side of humanity, yes, but does that make them a good person? No, it doesn't necessarily make them a good person. And I think that is perhaps one of the things that George R. R. Martin is going to be playing with this. We're not going to get a person who he points out and says, there, that's the person, that's the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai reborn, and all the rest of it. We're going to have various characters that other people think are Daenerys. In the course of the Winds of Winter, almost certainly is going to get a huge number of people starting to tell her that she is the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai reborn. Jon is being handpicked, has been handpicked by Bloodraven to be that very same thing. You will get more and more characters who start to embody some of these elements. But the point is not that this is a pure hero, but this is a broken hero in some way, who is not pure good, but has to sometimes do bad things in order to achieve what they need to. Just quick check through on the chat to see whether I am missing. Think I'm all caught up on my questions. Agreed Weirwood saying, Susan Dunkel, I want a ghost POV. Yes, I do too. A ghost POV from when Jon is inside Ghost. Okay, a few more questions from my patrons. Lawnduck20 says, when Stannis took Storm's End, he burned the weirwood as an offering to the Red God. Do you think it's possible that he tries that at Winterfell if he wins the upcoming battle? We know he's not an endgame character, and attempting to burn Winterfell's heart tree is a death sentence with the Northern clansmen hanging around. Is there any way this could be the way he dies? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so I don't think he will. I think that he is very pragmatic when it comes to weirwoods. I think that he is going to accept the advice of Asher to take Theon to the weirwood tree in the island, on the island near to where Stannis is camped. I think while they're there, clearly there's going to be some sort of intervention through the weirwood tree by presumably Bran, maybe Bloodraven. So I think Stannis will actually see some truth here, and he will also see how important it is to the Northmen about what's going on with the weirwood tree, and he will understand that chopping them down will not endear him. He understands very clearly that if he were to be going around chopping down weirwood trees willy-nilly, that they would turn on him. So I don't think it's instinctively there. Just in terms of the battle, again, this is something I've been looking at a little bit more recently. So we've almost certainly got at least 2 battles coming up. The first battle with Stannis is the battle around the Crofters village, where Stannis is camped out. When you've got 2 armies are coming out from Winterfell to attack, the Frey army and the Manderleys. Now, I could get into the intricacies of the politics of the North there, but the Freys will be wanting to attack, but the Manderleys probably will not. In fact, if anything, they're probably going to attack the Freys. Roose Bolton sent both of them out because they were just at loggerheads with each other in Winterfell. The Boltons are happily now in Winterfell, having sent the troublemakers out. What could happen there was that maybe they would defeat Stannis, in which case, great, or maybe they won't and they will be defeated, in which case he's eliminated the problem of all these people fighting each other within Winterfell. So that's Roose Bolton's plan. Stannis, I suspect, will win that battle against the Freys. And then you've got another battle, which is how to get the Boltons out of Winterfell. By that point, I suspect Starks may be starting to get involved. Or at least this is Jon may well be back by that point. So I don't think he's going to be destroying the Winterfell weirwood tree. I don't think even if Melisandre suggests it, I don't think that she'll be able to get away with it in Winterfell that has just been reclaimed for the Starks, which is basically what's happening. Why would you then immediately offend them by cutting down their millennia-old centre of worship, even if she thinks it's heresy? Kerry Ray, thank you so much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that. Mara Lee saying, according to Robb Stark's will, he legitimized Jon Snow. Who will bring that information out into the public? Will it be Howland Reed? How about Lady Stoneheart? Will she confirm this is what Robb wanted before he was killed? So the will is... we never actually see it written, but it's pretty clear that, yes, this legitimizes Jon. It will probably work its way back up to Winterfell at some point. There are a couple of characters who are heading through the neck as it stands. They sort of disappeared for a while, but Mage Mormont and one of the Glovers, I forget which one, they will be there. They may well come across Howland Reed. They may well come across the bones of Ned Stark. There's lots of different people who could all come together, but that is the mechanism through which the will reach the north. So it will come out. Lady Stoneheart, if she remembers it, yes, she might say something, and it would certainly be some sort of a way for her to get some sort of catharsis to help Jon. So perhaps she hears that he's dead. Perhaps then she says, yes, he was legitimized. And then perhaps it turns out that he's not dead after all. There's lots of different ways that this could play through. Dion Gill says, will Jon Snow lead a natural life? Not suggesting he's immortal, but just wondering if he's resurrected and survives the Song of Ice and Fire, will he then grow old and pass, or will he get to his mid-70s and realise he's not aging naturally? Cheers. P.S. Glory, glory, Man United. Yeah, Glory, glory, Man United. One more point. That's all we need. Okay, so in terms of will Jon age? Yes, I think so. His resurrection is different to Beric's, and it's different to Lady Stoneheart's in that his body will have died, but his soul was not sort of departed and then sort of bits lingering. It has moved across completely into ghost. So that is a difference. So when it comes back in, it will be complete still. Yes, there will be sort of wolfish behaviors and all the rest of it, I am sure, but it's not the same as with Lady Stoneheart, where what Lady Stoneheart is now is just the remnants of what was Catstuck, because most of her has sort of gone. With Jon, it won't be like that. Once they get his body back up and running, then his spirit, his soul, his essence will be there and normal. So that's normal-ish. So I don't think he's going to be immortal, but we're not going to see. I'm very happy with this idea that he heads north of the wall at the end of all of this, not able, like Frodo, not able to enjoy the world that he has played a huge part in saving. So I think we'll see him go north, and that's the last we will hear from him. Alicia Kingston's in the chat. Hi there, Alicia. Saying that the Bloodstone Emperor killed his sister and brought in the Long Night. Azor Ahai killed his wife to forge a sword to end the Long Night. Coincidence? I think not. No, exactly. And that's the point I was trying to make. Is so the Bloodstone Emperor killing his sister, they say that this brought in the Long Night, whereas it's the opposite way round, as you're saying, Alicia. It's the opposite way round. Yes, we get the Azor Ahai figure killing his lover this time, but that's in order to end it. It's the stories got a little bit confused about whether this act was a good act or a bad act, and so yes, there is some kind of moral uncertainty here about this. Isn't just necessarily a good character or necessarily a bad character. It could be a bit of both. Ultraviolence, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, hi Robert, what do you think really happened between Ned and Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy? I did a video on this. So the Kingsguard, we think of them as being this great and wonderful set of heroic heroes and all the rest of it. They were great fighters and legendary people in their own lifetime, but we mustn't forget that all of them, including Arthur Dayne, stood by while their king performed atrocities. We have first-hand accounts of every kind of horror that Aerys did, and the Kingsguard accepted it and would have stepped in to prevent anyone from trying to stop it. These were people who took their oaths seriously. Every time in the fever dream that Ned has there, we shouldn't take the details of it, but the spirit of it, the idea behind it, is something we should pay attention to. And the conversation he has with them there is all about them saying, we swore an oath, we're standing by what we promised to do, that's it. That is the feeling that we're getting. They are doing what they have said that they would do. The last order they were given was to defend that tower against anyone who came at it. So that's what happened. They fought and defended. I think that it was largely how we understand the battle to have gone, in that everyone on Ned's side but Ned and Howland were killed. The other two members of the Kingsguard were killed, and we're left with what was frankly probably the best fighter on each side, Ned against Arthur Dayne. Then Howland intervened. And how exactly he intervened, we do not know. Maybe he, as if watch this channel a lot, then you know that I'm a big believer in the idea that Howland and Ashara were an item. Maybe he played the "I'm your brother-in-law" card. Maybe he did what happened on the show, stab him in the back. I don't think that's likely myself. Maybe he performed some kind of magic. Maybe he managed to negotiate a truce while they talked through what would happen and what they needed to do next. But in any event, I think that Ned managed to get in, and I think that Arthur Dayne died. And I think that he probably died by the fact that there was only one way out of this, which was to end his own life. That's my take. If you want to know the logic behind that, then go and have a look at a video I did about a year ago called something like "The Tower of Joy, Why Did They Fight?" So that's what I think happened there. I think it was a tragedy, and this is what Ned always, he thinks it's terrible, dark memories of what happened there. Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola. It seems that in the Winds of Winter, all the Stark children will head to Winterfell and reunite." Yes, it does seem that that's the way it's going to go. Of all of them, it seems to me that Arya is by far the most messed up in the head. What do you think could be the driving factor that could make Arya become normal again? I've heard theories that she could be the one who kills Lady Stoneheart out of mercy after seeing what vengeance can lead to, and this makes Arya be normal again. Well, I don't think Arya is going to return to who she was before. What has happened in her journey is that this is about her reclamation of her Stark identity, and this is similar to Sansa, actually, but in Braavos, it's her Stark nature fighting against this concept of being no one, and then she will fundamentally regain her Stark identity, reclaim it, as it were, and head back. Will she ever be normal? No. She's from as a child, she has trained, she has seen horrific things, she's watched her father be beheaded, she's being trained to be a ruthless assassin. She's not going to return to normal Arya. I don't think George R. R. Martin is going to give us that kind of outcome for her. She is going to be scarred and broken by what happened. Might she give her mother a sort of a mercy killing? Possibly, but I don't think that would return her to a good place necessarily. Her character arc takes her back to this idea of finishing off her kill list and retaining her Stark identity, but then what? I think the key is going to be in her reunion with Nymeria. I think that is a much stronger bond in the books than it was on the show, and whereas on the show they showed them meeting up and then going their separate ways, I don't think that will happen in the books. I think that they will meet, but they will not go their separate ways. She is spirit bonded with Nymeria. She dreams of being in Nymeria. She does things in her sleep as Nymeria. This is a very strong bond. So I think that an idea I had several years ago that I still think is possible for her is that she will end up just walking into Nymeria. The wolf is this ultimate expression of both starkishness, the dire wolf, and also being a ruthless killer, which is the two aspects of her character. And if they can be merged into one like that, then perhaps that's where she's going to be. But the show seemed to suggest that she would reach a point of walking away from being the killer. perhaps that was a little bit Hollywoody. George R. R. Martin, I think, is a little bit darker than that myself, but yeah, it's possible. Kerry Ray, thank you so much, saying, "Hey Robert, love your work. Thank you. Do you think the others could be trying to get to Winterfell's crypts to find or resurrect their 13th Lord Commander?" No, I don't think so. I don't think that's what they're aiming to do. George R. R. Martin hasn't told us what they're aiming to do, but I don't think this is just about them reclaiming their leader, because why spend all that time waiting and just come back then? No, this is something they've been nudged into action by something else. They, I think, are there more to do with the children of the forest than about anything else. This is about their own self-identity, rather than trying to find the 13th Lord Commander. I think it's an interesting idea, but I don't think that the Starks buried him there and then sort of caved it in, thinking, oh, maybe this will the others will come and try and claim them at some point. Megasandra says, "Greetings. How much do you think George R. R. Martin will model the fate of House Stark after the real-life House of York in the War of the Roses? Will there be a Henry Tudor type to unite the Starks and Lannisters with a new house sigil?" So this was the original historical inspiration for A Game of Thrones, was the War of the Roses, which was this long-running war between House York, which is obviously House Stark, and House Lancaster, which is House Lannister, and how that broadly ended was that the two houses were brought together, they were merged, and then they formed a new sigil by taking the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York and sort of merging them into a white and red rose, which is effectively like the merging of sigils. Now, this is an idea that I've talked about several times before, and I've also said several times what I'm going to try and do, and I promise I will at some point do this, is get a proper historian on here to talk about the War of the Roses. I'm an amateur historian, I enjoy it, but getting an actual professional who knows what they're talking about would be so much fun. So I'm definitely going to try and do that. But is it likely that the Starks and the Lannisters are going to be merged at the end of it? I don't think now the big fight is between the Starks and the Lannisters. I don't. That was how the whole thing started out, but I think George R. R. Martin's story has expanded out beyond that. If it did, it would be with the union of Tyrion and Sansa. That's the only way that this can happen. I think they were, of course, married, and she. Sansa now is very much of the mindset of, actually, you know what? Tyrion wasn't that bad, was he? Out of all the men in her life that she's been associated with in some way, Tyrion was probably the nicest to her. So that's one possible end. The other one, you also wonder about whether Sansa will fill the role of Elizabeth. You say Elizabeth II, I think you mean Elizabeth I. The current queen is Elizabeth II, who was she was known as the Virgin Queen. Quite how accurate that is, we perhaps could speculate, but she had red hair. She ruled on her own. She didn't marry, and this. Many people have seen links across to how Sansa could end up ruling on her own. No need to marry. She doesn't need men anymore to be defining her, to be ruling her, to be in charge. She finally is in a safe place, being in charge herself. So yes, that's entirely possible. I think that's the one I'm erring more towards now, is this idea of her as this Elizabeth I figure, rather than her the Yorks and the Starks and the Lannisters merging. That doesn't the story seems to have expanded much more broadly than that. Eric Fogg saying, Fire and Blood, the book, frequently refers to Starks and Northerners as savages. Is that just the fictional author's bias, or were the Starks much more wild still at that point? Yeah, I think that this is the fictional author's bias. This is the history books that we have about the world of Ice and Fire. They're written by the Maesters, and the Maesters are fundamentally Southern. Yes, they do send people up to the north, but it's a very biased account. So calling them savages is a reflection of the author, not necessarily the truth. If you try and think about it from a sort of a Southern perspective, they think that they're the Maesters are all very much about knowledge and all the rest of it, and there is a religion, a state religion that is there with the faith of the Seven. The Northerners worship trees. The Northerners wear furs. The Northerners have a lot more sort of brutal attitude towards the world because they have to, because of winter. And yes, to the Southerners, that probably does look quite savage, but it's just that it's a different geography, a different world, and so and there's a bias that is being shown through by George R. R. Martin. Bride of Fire saying, hi, Robert. George R. R. Martin has previously said all of the Stark kids are wargs, but Sansa's was cut short due to Lady being killed. Do you think we'll see her skin changing reawaken anytime soon? I personally like the idea she'll start skin changing into birds. Yeah, this is an idea which has been knocking around for a while. Sansa is a skin changer, a warg, naturally, but she has never had the chance to develop that bond. All of the Starks with their direwolves, the bond developed over time. It didn't just immediately happen. It developed over time. Sansa didn't get that opportunity because although she was clearly very close to Lady was killed very early on. Now, after that, she has had a lot of bird symbolism about her. She was called Little Bird. Cersei was calling her Little Bird. Then she goes to the Eyrie. She looks out. She sees the eagles. All of this is very bird symbolism surrounding her. So yes, it's entirely possible that if she does do any kind of warging, then it's going to be into a bird rather than a direwolf. The direwolves are all done now. She can't start warging into one of the other direwolves. Oh, pardon me, one of the other direwolves, presumably just straight away. But will it happen? I'm not so sure. I think that basically she is set up as the least Starkish of the Starks, and her colouring is very Tully. She initially didn't want to be in Winterfell. She wanted to embrace the Southern ways and all the rest of it. And so it's just her coming back. She's coming back full circle to actually wanting to be like a Stark, even though she isn't personally very Starkish. That is actually her home. And I think that that's where it is. And her warging into a bird, well, maybe it would be quite a northernish thing to be doing, but we need to have some reason for that to be happening, I think. Aaron Breckelson saying, do you think the reason Brandon Stark is credited with building so many things, this is Brandon the Builder, I assume, is because it was passed down magical building knowledge, perhaps many generations of Stark Magical Builders LLC? Yeah, so this is a thought that I've had, that it doesn't, just because something is has Bran Stark's name or Bran the Builder's name attached to it doesn't mean that he has to personally be there. Yes, he could have told his children how to do the things that he did, and some of them are also called Bran. There's lots of Bran Starks, and they could have been involved in building Storm's End or the High Tower or anything like that. So even today, you get buildings that are named after architects like Norman Foster, to pick a name out, that probably weren't necessarily designed by him personally, but by his company, the Norman Foster Company, which means that you get, as the point you're alluding to, it's in the style of, rather than necessarily that one person doing all of the work themselves. And so we get artistic styles that are named after particular people. This doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same Brandon Stark who's doing all of these things. Okay. We've got 2 or 3 more questions from my patrons to go. So now is a good time to start dropping questions into the chat. I'll try and get as many of them as possible. Mara Lee says, on the TV show, Arya sails west, Jon is on the wall, Sansa is Queen of the North, and Bran the Broken becomes King of the Six Kingdoms. Where do you see House Stark and these characters by the end of the A Song of Ice and Fire book series? Who's still alive, and what's going to happen to their character arcs? So I've covered some of these off already, so I will cover some of the other ones. So Jon, I think, yes, I very much see him heading north of the wall. That seems very much the spirit of what's going on. Sansa, I see Queen of the North. I think that is definitely what's going to be happening. Bran, indeed, again, I see it seems most likely at the moment that he is going to end up as king. The one that I am not sure about is Arya. Might she head off to the west? As I say, I outlined my idea about maybe going into Nymeria. Might she head off to the west? George R. R. Martin has teased this again in Fire and Blood, this idea of sailing off to the west. So the showrunner's got the idea from somewhere. It's possible that what Arya is left with is that she is a Stark, but she doesn't want to be a noble lady. If she's turned her back on being a vengeful assassin, then what's left? Exploring new worlds seems to be a sensible idea for her. So it's definitely possible that she could. I'm not letting go of my idea that she will walk into Nymeria just yet, but it's possible. Do you see at the end of the Song of Ice and Fire series House Stark getting ice back, or will it always remain the two swords, Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper? I think I could see this either way. I know I've had conversations with people on here before who've suggested that perhaps it will be reforged at some point in the Winds of Winter to remake ice, whereas I like that sort of symbolically the return of House Stark and all the rest of it. I think that pragmatically they will keep those two swords which can be used in combat, which incidentally, I think I said this before, Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper are quite representative of Lyanna and Ned. Widow's Wail, Lyanna was the widow who we hear her crying out from the Tower of Joy. Oathkeeper is Ned for keeping his promises about Jon. So they are still representative of House Stark, even unintentionally. I think, yes, perhaps at the very end of it, they will get merged. Whether we see that or not, I don't know. But I think that House Stark will reclaim theirs. And that will be quite a symbolic act. And Samuel Leask, my last question from my patrons, saying, if you don't mind me asking, I'd love to hear what your top favorite show-only moment is from any of the later seasons of Game of Thrones, 5 to 8. I think my answer to this has to be, well, I think I've got 2, 3. I keep on adding to them, I'm sure. The whole episode with Brienne's knighting, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, was great. Loved it. I think that's perfect. I definitely want that to happen in the books. It worked on so many different levels, so that I thought was fantastic. I thought the next episode, where you get the long night episode where it was all very dark and all the rest of it, there was a standout moment for me with the dragons fighting, and that's something that I've been looking forward to for so long. We saw the Dance of the dragons fighting in the skies. That was so good. I loved that. And I also loved way back at it must have been the end of season 6, when you just saw Daenerys's fleet heading to Westeros. It won't be exactly the same in the books, but the feel is there. It's this, finally, after all of this time when she's gone through everything that she's gone through, finally she is now heading to Westeros to claim what she believes is hers with fire and blood. That whole image, when you just sort of zoom out, see all of the ships, the dragons flying overhead, I thought that was a majestic little scene. They didn't have to say anything. It was all there. Reflective Rambling, thank you so much for the super chat, and saying thanks for overtime week 4. Is this the 4th week in a row I've overrun? Okay. Too many good questions. This is the problem. So, and a question for Mark Daniel. Thank you again for picking up a question from someone else. Is there any significance to Winterfell's broken tower? The book has many abandoned towers in important places, Harrenhal, Nightfort, but nowhere so well occupied. Yeah, well, I think there's symbolic importance to it. So this is an old tower, and I think that this is symbolically showing that the Starks are not as honoring of history and remembering of history as they might like to think, because the Winterfell, if they were looking after their history, if they were retaining what they should be retaining, then they would be keeping the older things as long as they're useful. But there they have just let slap bang in the middle of Winterfell a tower that is broken, and they've just let it go to rot, basically. And so I think that is just symbolically showing that when they've got all this highfalutin talk of the North remembers, the North has not remembered. There is more going on beneath the surface. So I think it's a symbolic thing, and also it introduces this concept of broken things right at the very beginning. The broken tower. Bran is then broken from his fall, and then we get all the other broken people that come after that. So it's introducing this concept as well. But thank you. That was an interesting question. Dave N, thank you for the super chat. I can't see a question attached to that one, but thank you. Agree Weirwood saying, if there's a Stark connected to a Weirwood in the Godswood like Bloodraven, maybe that's the history of the words. I'm not sure which words. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell, I assume. Yes, they would have to be underneath the ground, obviously. Just as an aside, in case you've never noticed, so the Weirwood's roots, you would expect, given how big the Weirwood tree is and the placement of the crypt, you would expect some of them to have sort of broken through the crypt over time, but it seems as if they're actually not. They're going around the outside, almost cocooning the crypt. So that is a fascinating show that the Weirwood Network want the crypts to remain as they are and protected. Susan Dunkel saying, hi, Robert. Hi, Susan. What is your favourite song in the series? I'm rereading and finding the songs so much more interesting this second time through. Thank you. Oh, good question. My favourite song. George R. R. Martin he includes quite a few songs in that. Well, in terms of the sort of the beauty of it, Jenny's song, that we saw on the show, obviously, in great rendition. When reading the books, the one that struck me the most was The Bear and the Maiden Fair, which clearly it's not the kind of deep and meaningful song. So George R. R. Martin has echoes of Tolkien, and Tolkien used to have songs and things in there, but a lot of his were very beautiful elven language and all the rest of it. This is a song that everybody would know and join in and get drunk and sing the words, but he creates that song at that level that then has thematic importance going throughout the story. Immediately with Brienne and the bear and Jaime and all the rest of it, and the fact when you actually get into the lyrics, it's not what you think it might be. This is about seeing beauty within, and caring about somebody despite what they might look like. So it's actually quite a layered song, though comes across very much as being just sort of the kind of thing that you would sing down the pub. So that's probably that's my favorite. I think I will with that. I think with that, I'm probably going to start wrapping this up. Next week, what I'm going to do is I think, cover. I haven't decided yet. It's either going to be House Hightower, which is a criminally underlooked at house, or House Targaryen. So I haven't decided yet, but that's what's going to happen next week. In the meantime, if you're watching this back later, not live, then there will be a link appearing somewhere around here, which is a link to other live streams that I've been doing, and there will be a link appearing somewhere around here to my Patreon page if you want to support this channel, if you want to get access to some of the benefits that I do for my patrons. That is the place to go. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Some fantastic questions today. I really enjoyed this chat. The House Stark is clearly an amazing house. Thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you again next time.